Hello, dear all. Today, in this short video, we shall be talking about the beginning of the two novels, The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy and The Things Fall Apart by Chinmay Achebe. And in this video, we shall try to highlight how these two texts begin in a different way, what are the basic reasons behind that, and what are the kind of similarities behind that, so that we may be able to establish the type of comparison between the two writers as well as the two texts and try to find out how they share the post-coloniality with one another. The very first thing that I must interpret before we go further, we should see how these texts can be understood, how the start of these two texts can be understood. Like we should see that one text is African and other one is Indian. In this context, the text should be seen, the start of the two texts should be seen. One text, which is Chinmay Achebe's Things Fall Apart, is written by a man writer, and the other text, Things Fall Apart, it's written by a woman writer. We need to look at that, how these two writers begin their texts in a different way. Besides this, Chinmay Achebe's book is written in the 1950s and goes to portray the Africa or Nigeria or Igbo society of 18th century. But the case of The God of Small Things is different. It's portrayed, it's written in the 1990s, and it goes to talk about the time, the happenings of the 1970s in India, Kerala state. In that way, one text goes to represent the ancientness, and the other text talks about the modernness of the world in which the text is being produced. And same is the case with the characters, that in case of The God of Small Things, we have the characters which are shown to be the migrant characters which have come from the other areas and have dwelt and lived for a long time in India. While in case of Things Fall Apart, the characters are indigenous. They are not shown to be the migrating one, they are shown to be living in those areas for centuries and centuries. It means that one text is Things Fall Apart, for example, is a text written at the time when colonialism was spreading, while the other text, the Arundhati Roy's text, for example, The God of Small Things, is being written at that time when post-colonialism is going on. I mean, the writers, when they had started to write back to the empire. In one case, we see that the tragedy of one individual occurs, and that tragedy can be generalized on the whole of the tribe, whole of the country, whole of the globe even. But on the other hand, we see that the collective tragedy occurs in case of The God of Small Things, that not just one person, but many people die whenever they try to cross their boundaries, which have been established by their respective societies. In case of African novel, Things Fall Apart, we have the language which reflects the African taste. And in case of The God of Small Things, we have the Indian experimentation of language, as it has been going on with many of the South Asian writers. For example, if you look at the first passage of the text Things Fall Apart by Chinmay Achebe, first passage, introductory passage on the very first page, it goes to talk about the wrestling match which had taken place between the two major wrestlers. One is Okonkwo himself, another one is Emma Lindsay, which has also been titled as the Cat, because very clever, very sharp, very skillful in fighting the match. While Okonkwo has been shown to be the person who could defeat such a very skillful wrestler, and when he can defeat him, it goes to establish his prowess. So we can say that the very first page of the text, Things Fall Apart, reflects about the power, the muscular power of the man's body with which he can conquer the other people, even if they may be so powerful as compared to him. Well, in the same way, the second passage on the same page goes to talk about the fierceness, the heaviness, or we can say muscularly well-builtness of Okonkwo. For example, the writer talks about, first of all, that he was a very tall, huge type of guy, had bushy eyebrows and very wide nose, and then when he would sleep, the people could listen to his breathing, so heavily he breathed. And same is the case with his walk, that he would be walking in the same way as if he's springing. I mean, it's a very powerful kind of walk. And then he, writer tells us about the stammer in his language, and he goes to talk about also the kind of pouncing upon factor in his point of view, in his attitude towards the people, and he could therefore beat up anyone. So that is the type of description of the character of Okonkwo on the very first page, in the first two passages, that again and again his body is being highlighted, that he's got the muscular body, and he can be so powerful in that society. He has proved his power, and he appeared to be very much powerful as well. On the third passage, if we go on the same page, we find that the father of Okonkwo is being talked about, in exact contrast to Okonkwo himself, for example. The contrast goes to show that Okonkwo's father, Anoka, is the person who is quite reverse to him. For example, he's not a fighter, he's not a brave person, he is not fighting with the people, he is not proving his prowess by having a wrestling match. Instead of that, he's just a lazy, just a calm, soft type of person who would take more interest in singing, dancing, or enjoying life rather than undergoing some type of difficulties where he may be trying to show that life is good and he is born to enjoy his life. Such is the description that Chinua Achebe has given to his novel in the very first page, in the first three passages. That's the type of introduction. Let us now move on to the novel, The God of Small Things by Arun Rai. Let's see what she does in the very first passage. According to her, the novel begins with the description of the rains that come in monsoon. And we all know that in South Asia, monsoons come rather sometime very bitterly, and the rain pours very heavily. And because of that, small puddles, she says, are formed. And because of that, many new plants grow up and many plants ripen. And in that way, the world of nature glows itself everywhere. One can see the greenery everywhere. One can see the kind of animals, small insects growing everywhere. And in the same way, very humorously talking, the writer goes to point out that some of the streets are flooded, and because of which boats are needed in the bazaars. In that way, the heaviness of the rain, and because of the rain, the greenery growing up, and the light of the sun, the heat of the sun, all these things combined together go to create a type of environment in which all is wet as well and all is green as well, and this greenery is blooming and it's giving birth to the other types of life as well. For example, in the passage 2, the life of the animals has been talked about. Like we go to find that there are the animals like snakes which are roaming about here and there in the bushes, and the moss has also grown up on different walls. Besides this moss and the snakes, we have the description of the bullfrogs as well, which are definitely croaking and are giving voices here and there. Mongoose, another animal, has been also formed. So it means that in the first passage, if nature with rain has been talked about in detail with its effects as well, the second passage is replete with the animals' movement and animals' life, how they are enjoying because of the presence of this watery season and the environment which has grown because of this watery season. Animals have been brought in as well, and these are really bullfrogs and the mongoose, and similarly the snakes or the animals which possibly normally are not seen so curiously. We want to see them, but they are not available. However, in the month of this season, monsoon, these animals are quite available, and therefore around the Aminim house, the animal life has also been talked about in the second passage of the first page of the novel God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. The third passage, which is comparatively a very small passage taken by the writer, this is the passage where a machine would be introduced to us, and along with that machine, one human character will also be introduced to us, which is definitely just similar to uh, the character of Okonkwo in the novel. Things fall apart, but only in fierceness. Otherwise, there are many issues which are 100% different from Okonkwo. So, in that way, the third passage goes to talk about Plymouth, one of the machines. That means a car which is standing there. And besides that, we find that the house is mostly empty. And in the empty house, the windows and the doors are locked, they're not open. And in the front veranda, we can just have a look at one sky blue tail fins car, and that can be seen standing there, parked there. And alongside this, inside the house, one can see that baby Kujama is still alive. It means she's got a long age, not the short, so that we may not capture any idea from the word baby that she's a small baby. No, she's still alive. It means that she has been living for a long time. So this is the description on the very first page of the novel, the God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. And now let's see how we should perceive these two novels, the beginning of these two novels. We can see that in case of Achebe's first page, Achebe's novel Things Fall Apart first page, we can see that it describes about wrestler and wrestling is going on, a manly game of power, and the description goes to establish man's prowess, man's power, and in that description, the description of the woman is 100% absent because it's been shown that the place, the culture for the Africa that we are going to read, is the place where the world of struggle is there, world of physical struggle is there. That is why man has been shown to be very much important at the center of the places. So it's very much the man's world. It's a competitive culture where you need to prove yourself powerful, and in that way you can make the people believe that you are an important person, a hero type of person. That's the description given here. And this is the time when colonial system was in the offing in Africa, and that coloniality was spreading here and there. And in the backdrop of this colonialism, we find a character which is a national character, which is a very huge character, it's a very powerful character. Such a character will undergo a tragic situation because of this colonialism. But the first page does not say so. First page only highlights the importance, the heroship, the bravery, the powerfulness of a man who is very much indigenous in character. But if you just go to a Royce novel, we have found out that the description goes with the weather and the climate, and then the flowers and plantations come, and birds and animals come. A home is described, the car comes there, and ultimately, at the end of the third passage of the first page, the miserable woman, baby Kujama, has been talked about. We do not see anything which resembles with the description of a Akanko as a man, as a wrestler, as a powerful wrestler, that we don't see at all. Instead, we see that the novel goes to talk about the word of the moment, which is definitely living for a long time in a miserable way. And her life story so begins from here. And this miserability of the life of Baby Kuchama can be or would be seen in every character, of course. But in this page, the very first page, we don't find such things. It means that this novel is mainly a woman's competitive word novel, and it has been written at the time when post-coloniality was there, not the coloniality was there. So it is the description that goes just like the description of Chaucer in his prologue to the Canterbury Tales, the very first page, very first introduction to that book goes to talk about first the four elements of nature: water, heat, earth, or then it is the sunlight. And after that, it brings the birds there. Joseph brings birds there, singing, dancing animals, and then he brings the human beings, what they are feeling in that way. Same as the kind of description of Roy's first page of the novel, The God of Small Things. But it is not Joseph's poetry, it is the novel which is written in the post-colonial context. And let us see how then we can conclude if this is the description on both the novels. First, we should see that the time and the space of both the novels are different. Arundhati Roy's novel, The God of Small Things, is being written at a time when post-colonial writers are writing back to the empire. So therefore, here the need of establishment of a very huge power was not required, but rather the offshoots, the kind of results and consequences of the colonial system in India, that was more to be described in terms of indigenousness, where some inherent evils like the caste system were present, how the people were living under these caste system. There were some laws which were forbidden love laws, or simply negating the love between the people. And because of this negation, there are problems, suffering, and tragedies in the life of the people. And that is why this description is quite different from the description of the people which have been talked about in Chinua Achebe's novel Things Fall Apart. This novel more talks about the colonial time when one probably needed to show that the indigenous man was also very much powerful in his own way, and such an indigenous man had been defeated by the colonial power. And because of that, such a powerful person went to the tragic end. So the novel goes to represent about man's stance mostly, but in case of Arundhati Roy's novel, a woman's stance have been talked about in more vigorous and vivid terminology. We can also see that the indigenousness is more present in Akankuo's description of the start of the novel. But on the other hand, we have the Christian minorities who inhabit India, who have come from outside of India, and they are now trying to survive in the Indian environment where all cultural aspect is stressing itself and is making the life of these minority people also difficult one. And if somebody tries to break the boundaries, that person is crushed. That person has to suffer the kind of tragedy in the life because if one wishes to break these boundaries. So therefore, it's more about the man-woman relationship and how do the women suffer because of this relation in India, in the particular Indian culture that is being described here. And the same culture, therefore, is all the time at odds with the Christian minorities or the other minorities. But on the other hand, in a Kanku's novel, that means the things fall apart where Achebe talks about the Ibo culture. Perhaps Ibo culture is quite different from the culture in India, and therefore it goes to represent ancientness of the culture where man's power was most dominant. But here in India, caste system is casting its evil impact upon the people, and it's still going on. And as a result, such a text has been created which should take care of these kind of things which happen to the people because of the caste system of India. So altogether, one can conclude that the text Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe takes us back to the time when colonialism was just about to pounce upon the indigenous people of Africa who were otherwise having their own culture, their own society, their own powerfulness, but were crushed under the load, rather the heavy load of colonialism. And what are the consequences of that? That can be seen in the novel The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, how these consequences are available, how the colonialism, even after ending, has become post-colonialism, and the people of these places, which were formerly colonized by Britain and by other colonial powers, these countries, these spaces are still undergoing the kind of differentiation, classification, racialism, and suffering from the ills of the culture, which has been at odd with the colonial master, but still it is having its own influence, and that is stressing itself even more in the age of post-coloniality. And thank you very much for watching this. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Next time we will be having even better discussion. Thank you so much, everybody.